Good morning and welcome to the Sports Desk live on Facebook. I'm your host, Ed Nunez, along with producer Alden Iwani. Our special guest today is Cibola Athletic Director and also head boys basketball coach, Ray Rodriguez. Coach, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Before we go on, I want to give Ralph Ortiz out at Desert Tees a shout out. Ralph Ortiz donated these shirts to us to ProView Networks organization. Ray, I don't know if you remember Ralph Ortiz. He officiated basketball and football many years, has given back a lot to the NMAA. So we want to give Ralph a shout out for making these shirts for us, and they're real classy, real styling shirts. So thanks to Ralph Ortiz, a great guy that's given so much back to the NMAA. But coach, we go back so many years. We go back. You've been a lifelong friend, and it's funny. I live in the neighborhood you grew up in, right across the street from your old house. And your mother was your late mother, Emma Lou, was my neighbor until 2002. She's the one, along with you, that helped us find this house. So, I got a story to tell. It's funny because back in the day when we played at Highland, you're 2 years older than me. I'd run from my house to come and get you, and we'd run to Highland. And I always told everybody, I don't know why you didn't run cross country, because you'd be blocks ahead of me. And, we'd be going to work out with Coach Lucero in the morning about 6 o'clock. Me, you, Ernie Lucero, played at Albuquerque High, Joe Bradley. We couldn't get into basketball. We were gym rats even then. And I tell people, we closed down Whittier at night. We played a lot of outdoor ball and probably ruined my knees because of that. But, we had a lot of fun growing up. Like I said, you were 2 years older. You played on the 78 Highland team, which one of the best starting fives in the city, man. Yourself, all city guard Joe Bradley, the late Marshall Smith, Oscar Huber, and Jim Herbert. And Coach Tom Hogue did not believe in using a deep bench. He might have used Gerald Mays a little bit. But talk a little about that 78 team. I've got a quote I want to give you here in a minute. But that team was tough. Lost some tough games. Albuquerque High lost first round to Del Norte in the state tournament. But talk a little bit about that 78 team. And that was a good team.
Well, it was a great group of guys. And Tom Hogue had a big influence on me, with the defense, and Tom never played anything but man to man. And what people don't understand about Coach Hogue was he would take his man to man and he would adjust it to a sagging man or a pressure man or different things like that. So we were, even though we never played zone, he made a lot of adjustments with his man-to-man defense. And he was a hard-nosed coach, and as you know, and he had that gruff exterior, but he was, down deep inside, I think he was a great man and cared about your development, not just as a basketball player. But those are the four guys I played with, along with Gerald Mays and Craig Stegman and was it David Vigil and a lot of those kids, you're right. We probably, were it not for Coach Hogue's philosophy, could have been deeper. We had some guys that could have contributed more. And when I think you were a sophomore then, and you and Kirby and some of those guys could have played. And he just didn't believe in that. It's much like when I was a junior. We all thought we could play up, but Coach Hogue was just. He believed in experience, and he was pretty successful with the formula. You can question any coach's motives or philosophies or methodologies, but he was pretty successful, at Highland. And he had a lot of good athletes as well, but great group. Joe Bradley and I are still great friends. He texted me last night. We text back and forth. We go out to dinner sometimes, and so we stay close, and that's a sign of what that program was about and what that team was about, And I still stay in touch a little bit with Oscar as well, and as you mentioned, that the late Marshall Smith, he was very close to us, at the time, and so great experience. Wouldn't change it for the world.
It's funny. I got a quote from you from Joe Bradley, who's also a very good friend of mine. Ray was the captain and voice of a lot of Volto guys in 1978. He learned the basics of man-to-man defense from Tom Hogue, and he did mention this. He wanted me to mention this. You hit a corner shot against Valley to give Valley their only loss that season, and you were known as a corner shooter. And it's too bad they didn't have three-point shots then. Corner's your spot. You could hit from a lot of different spots, but the corner was your spot. So Joe wanted me to mention that. And if you remember, Coach, that Valley team with Mike Webster, Dickie Garcia, Jay Bobroff, the only guy I was ever afraid of inside. And, you know, we battled and battled. You and I played small man's tournaments. We played with Jim Murphy and Joe Bradley. We had some good teams. The only guy that kind of, I wouldn't say afraid, but kind of made me think twice was Mike Webster. Webster led the city in rebounding with 17.1 in 1978, 17 rebounds a game. So with Big Web, if you went in up against him and he hit you in the jaw with an elbow, too bad. He's not stopping. And that guy was strong, powerful. So Joe Bradley did want me to mention that. You beat Valley with a corner shot. And the other thing was, you mentioned this in 1977. You said this about Coach Hogue. It's fair to say that he did value experience, much like Coach Holzman did, right? Coach Holzman at Albuquerque had the same thing. In 77, we lost, and I'd say we, I was a freshman at St. Pius, but we lost Albuquerque High 54-49 in the 77 championship. Now, a lot of people, you were on the team, but a lot of people later said, and it's not a second guess of Coach Hogue, they're just saying Ray would have probably hit a lot of those corner shots, you know. And again, it just, those were things were said. Coach Hogue liked to slow the game down a little bit. He did believe in basic tenets of man-to-man pressure defense. You mentioned all the things, and he was kind of a gruff guy. I'll be honest, I played 2 years for him. I was a captain 2 years, and I don't think I can remember one time I had a conversation with him that I could say, you know, we really had a deep conversation. That wasn't him. It doesn't mean he didn't care, right? He had different ways of showing that. But you're right. If you look back at some of the talent Highland had, and man, you know, you coached some exceptional talent as well, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the old school Highland, the Jimmy Mosleys, the Marty Petersons, Dan McReynolds, Pat Lucero, Joe Carter, Kenny Dean. A lot of those guys came down to Whittier when we were young, and we banged up against them, and we got better. You know, we got better. So you're right, Coach Hogue certainly had his share of talent as well.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. That year, I wasn't originally the captain. We had these battles with Alamogordo, and I don't know if you remember Gordy Washington.
I do.
And we went up to Alamogordo, and you know, it was a pretty rough game. We were getting a lot of what we thought were bad calls.
I remember.
And, guys started getting technicals and thrown out of the game and all that. And I just remember Hogue telling me, like the next day of practice or whenever we met again, he said, Rodriguez, you're the captain now. And he goes, don't think you're hot stuff. You're just the only guy left that hasn't gotten in trouble. So I was like, thanks, coach. You know, it did, you know, back then, as you know, Bill Gentry used to say, don't smile till Christmas. He used to tell his student teachers, you know, that's the way it was. And if you got a backhanded compliment once in a while, you were pretty happy.
No, that's absolutely true, right? Because a lot of my friends played for Coach Gentry. And Coach Gentry, you know, now when I was, we coached in Highland together. I was your assistant for 2 years over there. And I remember one time, Coach Trinity Solis and I, you know, we were on your staff, and we go to Coach Gentry and ask him for some basketballs for the season, right? He's the AD at that time. All he said was not till football's over, and that's just the way he said it. And we didn't say anything like, but we're like, okay. We was in the old cage. You know, he didn't say anything like, I'll get him to you. That's all he said, not till football, and that's the way he said it. And so their word back then, now Coach Henry Sanchez was a little bit different, more gregarious, more outgoing, even asked me to run track. I'm like, Coach, I'm a tortoise. You don't want that. But just one of the greatest men you could ever meet, right? But back in the day, that was the approach of coaches. And you're absolutely right. Coach Gentry was an intimidating figure, man. You just didn't walk up to him and say hi. That didn't mean he didn't care either. I mean, the guy's a legend, right? He's a legendary coach, but it was different back then. And you had to learn, and you also served as an assistant in Las Vegas. You know, we'll get to that too. You learned from Coach Hogue, but you were an assistant also at Robertson High. You coached at middle school in Las Vegas. Talk a little bit about that experience. Also, we'll get to your Washington experience because you were there for 4 years. But talk about some of the experiences in Las Vegas when you were an assistant out there.
Oh, it was tremendous. It was towards the end of my, my college career, and I was free, and Coach Benny Gallegos was the head coach at Robertson, and asked me if I wanted to coach the seventh graders. I had 16 seventh graders on my team, and the best part about it was I got to do everything. I got to do purchase orders, travel setup. You know, we took buses to Santa Rosa and Taos, and those are experiences that a lot of APS head coaches have never had. You know, dealing with that kind of stuff. But but it was a great experience for me. I still, there's a lawyer in town who played on that team, who represents the NMA sometimes. So he reminded me at a meeting the other day about his experiences, and it was fun. It was a blast. I played all 16 kids every game, and I don't remember what our record was, but that was getting my feet wet as a coach. And to be honest with you, and you probably remember this too, just Parks and Rec. When you were working in Parks and Rec, we used to have teams back then.
Right.
We had the Pignons and the Majors.
That's right.
So
yeah.
you got to
Wilson.
coach.
Yeah.
You got to coach either one. So I really started coaching when I was 16 years old. My first county job, I was down here at Larzolo Elementary School, and we would travel all over. And I had a little baseball team, and then after a couple of weeks, we had a basketball team. And I had kids from down in the South Valley area, and it was almost like the movie Sandlot, because I couldn't mess with any positions. Like, this kid pitched every day, and everybody knew that he was going to pitch every day. So once in a while, I tried to move him around, and man, it upset everybody. He's our pitcher, and I'm like, he's going to throw his arm out, and he's like, no, that's our pitcher. So it was fun. I had a blast with those kids when I was 16 years old. And so I started my coaching career pretty early. And in my second year at Robertson, I was a varsity assistant with Benny, and that was quite an experience. Playing in those East-West games were crazy back then. They were just, people coming out of the stands, and it was more than a basketball game.
It's funny because I had Adrian Ortega, the athletic director of the Fiscal Heritage and the head boys coach out there, and he said the same thing that you said. You're echoing the same thing he said about people coming out of the stands. Same thing. It's a war, right? It's not just a basketball game. And Coach Ortega, of course, one of the best ball players out there at Las Vegas Robertson, man, he mentioned that about the North, and the North is very passionate about their basketball for sure. Now, you served as an assistant also under Larry King at Highland before you got the head job, and I remember Mr. Weathersby, when he hired you at Highland. I remember Mr. Weathersby, man. I remember going to talk to him, and we were all so excited when you got that job, and you served as 7 years there. And, Highland, like you and me, were Highland grads. Now, you're a Cibola guy. You're a Cibola administrator and teacher and coach, but there's always that spot for Highland, right? Always that spot. Yeah, and you never forget it, man. I mean, I spent 9 years at parochial school, 1 year at St. Pius, and I love that part of my life. But Highland, when I still drive by, I still get that feeling, man. It's just an incredible school, and you did a great job. 2 finals appearances there at Highland, and you coached one of the greatest guards there was, and there's other guys too. Sean Baker. Sean Baker was one of the best, and what a state tournament appearance or state tournament performance he had, I believe, in '93. 47 points against La Cueva. You go to the finals against Albuquerque High, and Albuquerque had a great game, and Albuquerque High came out on top. It was a great game, and you coached some really good players out there at Highland. And when we get back, we got about a minute left in this segment, but I want to talk to you, of course, about what's going on, Coach, with APS athletics now. We're right in the middle of maybe are they going to play? We don't really know for sure. We hope so. And there's a lot of unanswered questions, and you as an athletic director are in all these Zoom meetings. So when we get back, we'll talk about all that, some other things. But we'll be back to the sports desk after these messages.
Get a little closer.
Oh, instead it's a gorgeous pass.
Here's what he'll
just shoot it.
He's going to go all the way.
He's going to fire at the buzzer, and he hits.
Great pass, Hadbury, and thank you very much.
Tie in the district. Inside, fly, Eagles.
Chavez uses some athleticism. And then Morris down low, able to finish. You called it, Steve, in 10 seconds. And look at this, stripped, stolen Watson. Christian Lucero beats the buzzer. Here's Ian Chavez, the sharpshooter. Got it.
Couldn't have said that any better. He answered the question. He
On
got
a
another one.
steal at the buzzer. Back to back for Chapman.
To the paint. Medina from the volleyball lines. Medina wants another one from deep. Oh, he wants 10. Give him 10.
Lewis finds Watson. He's going to finish. One-handed slam. Vista, but just all the different scenarios we could see potentially play out ahead of the state tournament.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walking to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number one. Cover it with green stuff, one scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of ProView Sports Network. Don't sacrifice quality of flavor when you're in a hurry. Golden Pride offers ribs, fried chicken, green and red chili breakfast burritos, and Frontier Cinnabons. 4 great locations, or visit us online at goldenpride@abq.com. Golden Pride Barbecue Chicken and Ribs, proud supporter of ProView Sports Network.
Welcome back to the Sports Desk live on Facebook. I'm your host, Ed Nunez, along with producer Alden Iwani. Our special guest today is Cibola Athletic Director and head boys basketball coach Ray Rodriguez. Coach, again, thanks so much for being on with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Coach, I got one more quote, and it's from a good friend of both of ours, Phil Schreier. He made the call in 1998 to hire you at Cibola. And Phil's been a good friend of mine, a good friend of yours. But I asked him last night, he said, you believe defense is the key, and your practices are proof positive of that, Tenet. You believe in preparation. Ray is the ultra competitor. He has the utmost respect for Ray Rodriguez, always has and always will. So words from Phil Schreier.
That's very nice. I've always had a great deal of respect for Phil, and we coached against each other. My very first game at Highland was against Cibola, and Phil was the head coach. So
I remember that game. We won that game. I remember that game. We won. Kevin Malone had a big game. I remember. Kevin Malone had a big game. We pulled that one out. It was a tough game, but we did pull it out. You know, Coach, I want to ask you about this and about now. APS athletics now. We reminisce a little bit. Where's Cibola now? You mentioned last night you're hoping football in the spring or the fall sports get a shot. Give me a synopsis of where you think that is. Now it's hard because everything seems to be changing on a daily basis. Talk about where you think we are with fall sports.
Well, it doesn't look, to be honest with you, it doesn't look great for fall sports right now, just given the timelines and the guidelines that are set forth by the PED and the state. For example, football, by the way, football has just been working so hard every day. Those kids have come in and they still have hope, and they're really working hard in the weight room, really working hard on the football field. And despite the fact they're in pods of 1 to 4, they could put pads on tomorrow and start full practices. They're ready. They have a good foundation, and that's a credit to Coach Williams and those kids. They have been very committed. But given this, the decoupling that they've talked about, the decoupling sports from hybrid, so that you're not restricted to being in a hybrid situation in school to be able to play sports. All of our athletes right now have to be eligible. They have to have academics. They have to have the grades to compete, and 99% of them do. And coaches have worked very hard, even though we've been in remote, to make sure those kids are doing well in school. And that's been difficult. That's been difficult, as you well know. Learning remotely and online all the time is tough. Kid can choose to not to turn his computer on. You know how easy that is. You're at home and and mom or dad might be at work, and you're sitting there with the computer all day, and kids have made some difficult choices in that regard, and you can't blame them, but at the same time, you got to credit these coaches for what they've done to keep these kids going and keep them engaged. And we need the powers that be to come through for these kids. We, at the school level, our hands are tied right now. We're restricted to those guidelines. And if we stay with those guidelines where we have to be in hybrid for 2 weeks before we get the kid out of one to four pods, it's going to make it tough for football, starting in the middle of March with only a few weeks left. So we need some things to change. And I know there's some things in the works, but hopefully that happens quickly.
Yeah, we're pushing up against kind of time limits because they keep pushing things back. And again, everybody has to be tested. And unfortunately, this virus, I've covered sports for 99.9 in town, and it's hit racing, soccer, swimming. It doesn't discriminate. It's affected sports and our lives in general, right? It's affected. Now, the good thing though, Coach, is vaccines. My wife and I lucked out. We got our first dose last Friday, right? So vaccines are coming. The spread is kind of evened out a little bit, not to the green level yet, but I think you're right. My only problem is this. Now, if it's the no, just say no, but to dangle carrots, and again, these are just thoughts for me, right? I don't count. I don't make those decisions. But it's hard when kids are saying, well, look, we might be able to do this then. And you're looking so forward to something. Like I said, you and I back in the day, along with Joe Bradley and some other guys, would go to Highland on Sunday just to play ball, man. I looked at that window and I look at that one window that Joe Bradley sometimes would get in. And I thought later, like, we must have been crazy because we're lucky Joe didn't hit his head or break his back. That's how much we wanted to play. So if we thought that then, right? I mean, it's hard because, again, the socialization, and we're saying school as well. We had some great teachers at Highland. You got some great educators at Cibola. You're one of them. So it's kind of hard just to be on Zoom all the time, and we're seeing some hope. So I think you have to give kids reasons to hope, right? Education-wise and athletics.
Absolutely. But, as I mentioned, as that window starts to narrow for fall sports now, and given the restrictions they have, because it's not just like, hey, if we started hybrid Monday, then these kids can start practicing, we can start playing next Monday. There's the hybrid has to, they're going to use the hybrid for 2 weeks to reveal positivity cases, and then allows teams to practice full force and get out of the pods of 1 to 4. So there's an additional timeline that these kids have to adhere to, which takes away part of this fall sports season. So that's the hard part. Absolutely stringing them along. I've been on Zooms all first semester, second semester, where and Sally's done it. Sally Marcus has done a great job of just keeping this thing going, and with the we will play again moniker, but it's just difficult because some districts are going to play and some districts aren't, and that's the hard part for our kids.
Yeah, you know what, Coach? That to me, that would kill me, right? I mean, I remember, and this is a funny story, I did get pulled up to varsity one time as a sophomore because you guys had players hurt. I remember that, and I was just minding my own business, by the way, and we're getting run by El Paso Bowie, and in the third quarter, Coach Hope puts me in, and I'm like, hey, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for that. But the next game for JV, I had to sit out because I played one game varsity. I had to sit out. That was the rule then. And I remember being in street clothes and not getting to play a game that I'm healthy to play in. And I'm mad. I'm so mad that my team's out there without me. So if I'm thinking that then, that's for one game. Imagine how kids are feeling if other kids are playing. Man, I don't know how we and all educators throughout the state have done a great job with trying to help the kids from the mental aspect. But I'll tell you, from somebody that's played and coached and officiated, that would be very hard for me to say, well, I don't know how to explain that. I mean, so hopefully some things change here and change, as you said, rather quickly because the sand is running out of the hourglass.
Absolutely. And the worst part is it's no fault of their own. They're getting good grades and they're working hard, they're preparing. And, I mean, we've talked about high school forever. You talk about glory days. That's what kids remember. And 99% of them aren't going to play it ever again. And that's what they remember. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
Coach, I want to talk to you. Got a couple questions left for you. Now, your Cibola basketball team, you got Brady Arrhenius back, and you got some makings of a good team. There's no question about it. And I do want to ask you about Amari Brown. Amari Brown is going to be a freshman there. He's got an offer already, a Division I offer now. You've coached Jude Roybal, you've coached Sean Baker, you've coached Roman Andrade. Now, those are great guards that you've coached. And Amari Brown has a long way to go before anybody even mentions him in that company. You want to talk a little bit about him, and again, your other players too, as well at Cibola.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Potentially, and just the contact I've had with him, he's a great kid, first and foremost, which is what you want in your program. Talent is fabulous, and there's some coaches that's all they care about is talent. But he's a nice young man. He's respectful and he understands what's important. So in that regard, he fits right in. But we have so many other kids that. One of the things that we talked about whether kids will play again or not. One of the things that comes to mind is I have some seniors this year who took a beating 2 years ago. I mean, we had a rough season. We were kind of rebuilding. We knew we weren't very good. A couple of years ago, we had 8 sophomores and 3 freshmen at a varsity level. Most of them were not ready for varsity, but they hung in there. They didn't quit. They kept getting better, and then they hung in there last year. And this year's kind of their payoff year for our seniors. Steve Barella, Arden Garcia, Josiah Herrera, kids like that who have hung in there after taking a beating that a lot of kids wouldn't have taken. We won, 3 years ago, we won one game. We had, not only do we have a tough schedule, but we had a bunch of kids who weren't ready for varsity. So those are the kids you worry about the most because they have the investment. They've invested. They've cared enough to invest. That they talk about that faith without evidence. These
Right.
kids have done that.
Yeah.
They don't know what's at the end. They don't know what's coming, but they still were willing to invest after taking a beating. How many kids can you say that about nowadays? So we got a lot of kids. We got 5 or 6 seniors that hopefully they get to play because they've earned it.
Yeah, and I think those are the things, Coach, when you mentioned that, gosh, yes, it's payback time, right? If that's me and I'm taking a beating for 2 years, I want to get on the court. And you talk about ultra competitiveness. I'm competitive, like Joe Brandy, the people that we've been around hate losing. I hate losing more than I like winning. One more question for you, Coach, before you wrap it up, and I'd be remiss not to ask you this. Your parents, Emma Lou and Ray Rodriguez, Ray, right? Your dad's name Ray as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 of the finest people. Talk about the influence they had on your life. I mean, I think about them, and just being across the street from where you grew up. 2 of the finest people you could ever meet. Talk about the influence they had on you.
Well, you've heard the phrase, you can't pick your parents. I lucked out. So very different. My dad was very much of a progressive thinker and was way ahead of his time. He died when he was 48 and was doing some things with, bilingual education and the multiculturalism at UNM. And he was just very much of a forward thinker. He was very, very different from my mom in the regard. It was like, we're going to take these kids, we're going to try things a little bit different than a lot of the Hispanic culture is, where we're sometimes very protective. My dad was kind of opposite. He was like, let him go try it. He'll figure it out. And my mom was a little more protective, but she was also tough. She ran the show and she kept us in line and had our best interests at heart, but there was some tough love involved. And I earned every bit of that tough love, and she had a huge impact on me and the rest of my brothers and sisters. They were very, very much into education. They were very much into being respectful and always trying your best and do for your community. So, I mean, I couldn't have picked 2 better parents.
Yeah, they were certainly about, we loved having your mom as our neighbor. Just a beautiful lady, and you come from great people. Cibola Athletic Director and head boys basketball coach Ray Rodriguez, thanks so much for joining us. Coach, let's hope there's some better times ahead for New Mexico's athletes.
Well, I appreciate it, Ed. It was awfully a pleasure for me.
You bet. For producer Alden Iwani, we'll see you next Tuesday on the Sports Desk.